very much for joining us here on Rising India. The last time we spoke was in June of last year at the CNN News18 Town Hall. You've become an even bigger rock star on social media and on traditional media since then. But let's talk brass tacks. Last June when we last spoke, the Russia-Ukraine war was just 3 months in. Now it's over a year. Did you expect this war to continue this long? And how has it changed global geopolitics? How has it changed your job in the last year?
Well, it was, I don't think it's a fair question to say, did you expect something to happen or not? Because a lot of people didn't expect the conflict to happen at all. But many things have changed. Many things have changed because the West has changed. Definitely, Europe has changed. Russia's relationship with the West has changed. I think that has other consequences. My sense is Russia's relationship with Asia will consequently change because it will turn more eastwards than it has done in its history for a long time. In many ways, issues like energy security, food security have come to the fore. It's also opened up a bit of a north-south divide. So at the moment you have a east-west friction and a north-south divide. So it's really made the world a much more difficult place.
So when you say the world has become a much more difficult place,
we are, to a great extent, the voice of the global south because I think, one, there is a natural empathy from our similar history, but also because we have made an effort. I mean, it's not something which just happened by itself. You've had G20 summits before. To the best of my knowledge, no other country said, okay, we are 20 countries around the table. There are 180 countries which are not around this table. So should we make an effort to find out what their expectations are of us? I think, to the best of my knowledge, we are the first country to have done that. And we actually, starting with Prime Minister himself and, 5 of us, including Piyush, who was here before me, we all spoke to our counterparts. We actually consulted 125 nations with this one question, which is we're going into G20, so tell us your key concerns and what is it we can articulate. That's one part of it. I think the other part of it is also we have in this whole period since February 24th last year, we have tried to press for you can say a return to peace, a return to negotiations. Yeah. In that sense, we have taken an independent position. I wouldn't say we're the only ones, but we certainly are among the more prominent ones. I do believe there is a real body of opinion out there, including in the G20. Mm-hmm. I would say probably we've been the more outspoken among them. Both in terms of the north-south divide as well as the east-west polarization, I think we have tried to be the bridging force there. And the world needs somebody like us.
So you're talking about the G20, and of course this is a big year for India. The session is called India's G20 moment. But how worried are you that there's so much fixation around a joint statement or the lack of it at the end of one? Because we had the foreign ministers meeting, you chaired that a few weeks ago. We had an outcome document, I believe, not a joint communique. Similarly, again, in the finance ministers meeting. Is there too much fixation on a joint statement?
Well, let me speak about the one which
Sure.
I chaired. We had a meeting. We had a outcome. We were negotiating essentially a 24-paragraph document. We had agreement on 22 paragraphs. There were 2 paragraphs pertaining to Ukraine, which basically was a carry forward of what happened at Bali, on which we could not get agreement. So, in a sense, we had to do a chair summary for the
Sure.
part we couldn't, and the outcome document for the part we could. Now, we have to be real about it. I mean, look at the state of the world. In this state of the world, if I could get 22 out of 24, so what's that in percentage terms?
About
So
95.
95. And never
In the services, you went to a top university.
well, we'll put that aside.
We'll park that aside.
So, no, but look, my point is what we really managed to do in the G20. I agree with you that one shouldn't be textually obsessed, though text does matter.
Sure.
I think our real contribution was to get the G20 back to the G20's real business. The G20 is not the UN Security Council. It's not the primary forum to debate international peace and security. I'm not saying international peace and security doesn't matter or doesn't have economic consequences. They do. But if you look today at the world, there are serious issues for the world to worry about. Food and energy security, green financing, Agenda 2030, trade issues, debt issues. We actually got something very novel for G20 to look at, and which I would like to build on, which is something called global skills mapping. That where are the skills in the world and where is the demand in the world? And they are in 2 different geographies.
Yeah.
So how do we actually put that together? I think that's a very interesting avenue that we have opened up for the G20. So the original mandate of the G20 was global growth and development. Now last year, because of the Ukraine conflict, I think the conversations went in the direction we would like to see. And in that sense, I would say more than getting 22 out of 24. I would take satisfaction in the fact that the finance ministers meeting in Bangalore and Bengaluru and my meeting in Delhi, we were able to get the G20 back on track.
So you're confident that in September when the leaders meet, a bulk of the conversations will be around the issues that you just outlined?
I would say, yes, that should be the progression. Every G20, there is a strong element of continuity. And there are some new ideas which come in. My sense is that you would see some ideas come in as well. Probably a bit early, may take a few meetings more for that to move. But I would certainly hope that by September, we would have a G20 leaders meeting which would look at the crucial issues pertaining to global growth and global development.
Sure. So one of the consequences, I guess, because of the war, or perhaps it's been accentuated because of the war, is the world is increasingly looking like 2 blocks. You have the United States and its partners on the one side, and you have Russia and China on the other, most of all because of what happened last week when Xi Jinping went to Moscow. What do you make of that? And how, again, I come back to this, how does a country like India play that? Because we are in neither camp.
I think you are oversimplifying this, deliberately so, I understand.
The journalist occupational
yes,
hazard.
Yes, absolutely, I get that. I'll tell you why you're oversimplifying it. it's not, Russia and China versus the West in that simplistic a term. After all, the primary partner, economic partner of China is the West, and the primary economic partner of the West is China. So they have an enormous amount of economic interface there. Where Russia is concerned, I would actually go back to my initial point, which is, I think one of the natural consequences of the Ukraine conflict is that Russia, a Eurasian power which has historically looked much more towards Europe, today finds its relationships with the West very, very difficult. So that Russia is inclined in many ways, therefore, to turn much more to the Asian side of Russia. Yeah. So I would predict fairly safely, and I think the numbers this year already bear me out, that you will see an intensification in Russia's relationship with Asia as a whole. Now, you spoke about Russia, China, but I would suggest to you that many other countries in Asia, maybe not economically all of the same size, but there are some fairly consequential economies. We would number one of them. And my expectation is you will see actually Russia also show that much more interest in developing its cooperation with India. Now, if you look at the India-Russia relationship, for the last 70 years, this has been one of the most steady relationships in international relations. That, take all the major players, Russia, China, Russia, West, China, you've seen enormous volatility in their relationship. Whereas from 1955, which was the year Bulganin and Khrushchev came to India, you've actually had a very, very steady, even after the breakup of the Soviet Union, actually, there was a bit of a gap there, but very quickly the relationship came back to where it was. So I do think that, yes, you will see a change in Russia's posture and priorities, but I think for India, this is also in many ways an opportunity to grow its relationship, because our relationship with Russia has been very, the bandwidth is very narrow. It has been mainly defense, nuclear and space. The trade relationship with Russia historically has been not historically, at least in the last 2-3 decades, has been very, very narrow. And you can see that grow.
So, but when now, particularly when European countries say that, before the start of the war, Russia was supplying India less than 1% of your oil requirements, suddenly Russia is your top oil supplier, what do you say to that?
I'd say the market is the market. We all believe in markets, right?
Of course. So let's talk a little bit about domestic politics as well, because as you said some time back, there's a lot of interest outside about domestic politics, and of course in India also there's a lot of interest about what's happening around the world. Your parliamentary colleague, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, the leader of the Congress party, he made some comments while he was abroad. There was a backlash to those comments. Your party basically wanted him to apologize, and then subsequently now there's a court conviction and he's been disqualified. I want to know your...
Sorry, the two are not related.
The two are not related. Fair enough. I'm just
so that we are clear.
Chronological order of what's happened with Mr. Gandhi over the last couple of weeks. I want, first of all, your reaction to the disqualification and what the opposition is saying, that, look, this sort of proves what we've been saying all along. The Modi government is illiberal. It's an electoral autocracy. Opposition's not being allowed to talk. How would you respond to them?
So let's assume I have a counterpart or a colleague, or I go abroad and somebody asks me what you're asking. How would I put it? That's essentially what you're asking me. I guess I would say that 4 years ago, Rahul Gandhi was disparaging of a community in a public meeting. This is not me saying it, it's on record. A member of that community took offense and began legal proceedings. Rahul Gandhi had an opportunity of rectifying the situation, of expressing regret. He chose not to do so. The legal proceedings then produced an outcome. The outcome triggered a law which I would remind you Rahul Gandhi himself had in a way supported some years ago. A law that has been applied, I think, to about 10, 12 other elected representatives, including of the ruling party. So my answer to somebody who asked me this would be the law is the law. Unless somebody thinks the law is not the law for them. I mean, that's...
Okay. Has anybody asked you this? Have any foreign diplomats or governments asked you this? But if they do, this would be your answer.
I'm practicing it on you, and if there is a...
Nice to know that you've equated me to a foreign diplomat. But let's, because the reason I ask you this is because there are ramifications of what he's saying and the narrative that the opposition wants to build. You have been vehemently opposing that narrative that's been constructed, some of which has been fed into by some sections of the Western press, that, since 2014, India has become an illiberal country, an electoral autocracy. You don't fear that this actions of the last 10 days or so feed into that narrative?
Look, my sense is those who are feeding that narrative, narrative are people with an agenda. They're not stupid people, okay? So they will misrepresent facts, or they would, twist things, because it's part of developing a narrative. I'll give you some examples. If you look at some of these think tanks and reports which would come out, many of them would suggest to you as though there's a whole problem around Assam, which started with Narendra Modi as Prime Minister. Okay, you and I know it goes back to Indira Gandhi's time. But that's not the way the narrative is now, the sleight of hand which happens. They would say, that a former Chief Justice now entering Parliament is somehow not well reflective of the judiciary. They won't tell you it's happened before, and not, yeah. So, the beauty of these narratives is, what you shade, what you suppress, what you sharpen, then you stitch it around. Now, yes, for people who do all of this, they would certainly use it. But to which I would turn around and ask them, saying, so tell me, does that mean this law, after being applied to 10 or 12 other people, should not apply in this case? And in this particular case, this law and this application has a certain past. Yeah. So I think we need to recognize today that a lot of what passes off as debate, what is often suggested as an analysis of the state of the Indian polity, is actually politics.
It's not analysis, it's more politics.
It is, absolutely.
So you talked about narratives and you gave the example of Assam. Now, one state where there seems to be this narrative and it directly has a bearing on your ministry and the missions abroad is Punjab and this whole Khalistan sentiment. We've had attacks on our missions in London, San Francisco. Yes, diplomats have been summoned, statements have been read out to them, so on and so forth. What else do you intend to do to send out the message that you're playing with India's national security and territorial integrity, and that's unacceptable?
Look, again, because here again, we mustn't fall for a narrative. We must actually look at what are the facts on the ground. So let's look at the facts on the ground in India, and let's look at the facts on the ground abroad. The fact on the ground in India is a bunch of people went by force into a police station to take out somebody, which was in violation of probably multiple provisions of the law. So tell me which country would countenance this? Okay, that's the fact within India. So You don't have to put a movement or a ideology to it. I mean, irrespective of whatever the issue. I mean, which law-abiding society would allow a mob to storm a police station and take somebody out? That is the bottom line situation. Now, if you look what's happening abroad, in the name of free speech and democratic freedoms, of which I'm equally a votary, if you allow people to intrude into diplomatic premises, to attack diplomats, to threaten diplomats, to take down flags, I ask you, suppose the roles were reversed. Suppose one of those countries had this done to one of their missions. What do you think they'd be saying? So I think somewhere it's time that we are clear about who we are and the stand that we take. And if these things happen, there will be consequences.
So, when you bring up these conversations with your counterparts, where these missions have been attacked, do they get it? Do they understand the seriousness of what's happening and what it means to India?
I would hope so.
Okay.
I would hope so. I think by and large, you will not disagree. I do communicate fairly clearly.
We'll give you that much.
And I think so do our ambassadors and my colleagues in the foreign ministry. I think we've been very, very straight with the few countries where these incidents have happened. I don't think they have any doubt about where we stand on this matter.
All right. You say so. Ambassadors are very clear where we stand on these issues. One of the incoming ambassadors, a good friend of yours, Mr. Garcetti, in his Senate confirmation hearing, apparently said that human rights was his major in college and he intends that to be very much part of the conversations when he lands in India. और आपने कहा कि उनको प्यार से समझा देंगे. प्यार से समझाएंगे इस मंच को कि क्या बोलेंगे आप उनको?
नहीं, उनको आने दीजिए ना. Let. I think he should. It's certain things in our profession are best done between us. So we will leave it at that.
Okay.
But I 100% प्यार से होगा.
प्यार से बुलाएंगे. So let me, talking about प्यार से समझाएंगे, I want to come back to the Rahul Gandhi question because, you've interacted with him in whatever limited fashion because, you briefed the Parliamentary Committee on External Affairs. He's a member. And he had recently said in England, while he was in England, that he drew this analogy between Ukraine and Ukraine and Arunachal. And he also said that I said this to the minister, and the minister said it's a ludicrous idea. Your comments on that, did that happen? Do you?
And the minister said what?
That it was a ludicrous idea.
Ludicrous. Okay.
Ludicrous idea.
Okay.
And also I want your general impressions of him because you've interacted with him, you briefed the members.
Look, we are not by etiquette and I guess by rules supposed to discuss what happened in a consultative committee meeting. So if he referred to it, in my view, he should not have. I certainly will not talk about what happened in a consultative committee meeting. But let's look at the substance of the issue, because he has said that on public record. Forget about the fact that there was a consultative committee meeting for a moment. The comparison is between what China did vis-a-vis India in 2020 and what is happening today in Ukraine. Okay. What is today happening in Ukraine, if you follow the two sides, one would say that they are threatened by the expansion of NATO and the character of the regime in Ukraine. And the other one would, the Western countries would say the Russians have ambitions, expansionist designs, whatever it is. What is the analogy between that and India-China? I mean, what happened in the border, which, by the way, is, in my view, completely indefensible. So don't get me wrong there. That has nothing to do, there's no NATO in play here. There's no regime character in play here. So I just don't see the comparison.
So tell me, since you mentioned China, where are we on this, the border confrontation that happened? I mean, I believe out of the 7 odd points, 5, there has been disengagement, 2, there is still no disengagement. Just a broad understanding that, do you believe this has gone beyond the remit of army commanders? This has to be a political sort of dialogue and eventually moving to resolve the situation?
Look, first you have to understand what is the nature of the problem. The nature of the problem is that two militaries who generally were not 24/7 deployed at or on or very close to the LAC have done so to a great degree after May of 2020. Because pre-May of 2020, both militaries were primarily located in the depth areas where they had permanent bases, and then they would patrol out into the LAC. Now, in 2020, the Chinese breached that in violation of the 93-96 agreements, brought forces to the LAC. Obviously, we countered it. They stayed there, we stayed there. So as a result, you have a very, very intricate situation of very multiple close-up deployments, which by common sense sort of military assessment is a very dangerous situation to be. And that danger, of course, was we had to caution them. And then, of course, Galwan happened, which only was proof that, you know, how volatile the situation could be. Now, in this, we have, you know, I met my counterpart in September 2020. He accepted that this was a dangerous situation. And since then, we've been trying to pull back the close-up deployments, not close-up deployments, the close-up forward deployments. But it can only be done if there is a mutual agreement. Because in the past, there have been occasions when, quite honestly, without revealing confidences, we may have made some such unilateral move and we found it was not necessarily responded to by the other side. So everything that we have done is on the basis of what we call the principle of mutual and equal security, which means, you know, if we move back here, you will move back there. So now again, some canards have been floated that, oh, buffer zones have been created in our patrolling areas. If I'm not able to patrol somewhere, he's also not able to patrol on that area. So it's, you know, whatever we have been done is mutual, it is negotiated. Now, this is still unfinished work. There are places where we have this forward deployments. We continue to work away at it. I will only remind you when this started in the summer of 2020. If you took the cumulative analysis of this city, people told me this, you know, we're not going to get a solution. You know, oh, the Chinese are going to do this, there's nothing you can do. I would say, please look at the last 2 to 3 years. You know, my sense is the military has done what the military should do. The military has deployed. The military deployed in the COVID. The military has deployed round the year. The military is deployed through the winter. The military is deployed at great heights. So, you know, and secondly, the military and diplomacy has worked in lockstep. Now, your question, you know, should you not leave it to military commanders? First of all, it has never been left entirely to military commanders. The military commanders and the diplomats work as a team. Now, you cannot, you know, to take away the military commanders is ridiculous because the military commander is a person who knows the troops, who knows the topography, who actually knows what is mutual and equal security, which by the way means it's not like the distance on the map. There are many other factors which come into being. So I would say actually in the last 3 years, this combo of military diplomacy and diplomacy working in lockstep has made progress. I accept that, you know, we have not been able to sort everything out, but I also tell you that I have not, you know, it's not like for me the end of the road. You know, we will keep at it. When I met the new foreign minister, Chingang, in Delhi on the sidelines of G20, it was something that we discussed. So it is work in progress, and I would certainly like to see more progress.
Since you mentioned you met the new Chinese foreign minister, there seems to be a bit of a change in Chinese diplomacy, if you will. You're seeing the moves that they're making vis-a-vis Iran and Saudi Arabia. They've also floated this 12-point peace plan with Ukraine. What do you make of it in general terms? Do you think that China is trying to play a major global role? And do you think that they're trying to sort of fill in a void they believe the US is leaving behind?
Look, I mean, no question that if you take any metric in the last 20, 25 years, I would say maybe even last 40 years, in many ways, China has gone up. So have we. Yeah. Okay. Maybe not at the same pace. Frankly, if we had honestly had this government, I know this is a very biased statement, but if we had had a government like this 25, 30 years ago, maybe we would have gone up faster. But at least today, if you look at the progress in the last decade, do also see that just like China's reach and influence and equities grow, ours too are growing. But in this particular case, what you are mentioning, I think you have a very complex regional problem in which obviously China is involved. The parties have found China useful in whatever that they are doing. And that is something which is a fact.
Do we recalibrate? Because we have huge energy requirements from there. We have a huge diaspora there. Is there any ramification for us?
Why do I need to recalibrate? I mean, how is this in any way affecting my relationship with Iran and my relationship with the Saudis? I mean, both relationships are doing well. Both relationships in the last 10 years have got much more attention than they got in the previous 20 years. And their governments understand that. So I'm doing quite well there. Thank you.
So, since you mentioned that, just as China's equity has grown, so has India's, would India want to attempt to try and play peacemaker between Russia and Ukraine?
Look, it's not that simple. I would say it's natural for India, if a situation arises where we can be helpful, of course we would like to be helpful. But, to say we would like to be helpful, to say would you like to play peacemaker, that's like a very high bar that you're setting. I'm not sure the conditions right now, in any case, would even justify such an expectation. But again, look, the messaging which Prime Minister has given both to President Putin and to President Zelensky, I've been with him in most of his conversations, is that, in our view, there should be a return to the negotiation table. If there is anything we can do, let me know. We are willing to do what we can. But we don't want to, force ourselves or insert ourselves in a situation which is not ripe for such a thing.
So since we've come to the almost last 10 minutes of this session, I want to ask a few personal questions. You are now a social media star, right? Do you plan these things? Ki when I go here, I'll give them this bite, ye viral ho jayega. I mean, even when we were outside, people are standing to take selfies with you and so on. How do you see this newfound stardom?
I would say it's, as you can see, even from my hesitation, that I'm not prepared. Okay. Look, mostly it happens in a conversation like you and I are having. It's something you say because somebody has provoked you or somebody has pressurized you or somebody has very cleverly, like you, manipulated you. So you end up saying something. But I guess it's the times, isn't it? I mean, this is an era where people would pick up a sentence, a phrase or something and move it beyond. I take it in that spirit.
How do your family members react to this? You're a celebrity now. You're more than just a diplomat or a minister. I think my family members probably,
we are even otherwise a relatively private family,
yeah.
and we try to become even more private as a consequence to all of this.
So, tell me, Minister, you travel a lot. Now that COVID is over, you're pretty much traveling 15 days in a month, maybe even more. People are curious, and people have been writing into our social media handles asking, what is your fitness regimen like?
Mix of things. Mostly, I mean, I do make an effort to stay fit, because if I don't, I'd be dead. I mean, given the travel and the time zones and the meal schedules you have. So I try to stay fit. I play 2 racket sports, squash and badminton, when I'm in Delhi. When I'm on travel, I actually started doing yoga about a decade ago. So that's kind of helpful. If I can find a gym, I'd go there. But I tell you, it's not just a question of being fit. I have realized that fitness is a kind of a prerequisite for a competitiveness. If you're feeling lousy about yourself that morning, you're not going to be all there. You're not going to give your best performance. You're not going to give that sharp reply or whatever. So if you want to be on that ball, so we have today fitness movements in the country. I'm very, very involved in it. I'm very supportive of it. Fit India, Khelo India, etc. I can actually see it having an impact on society. That if I were to look at the last decade, where in the last decade, I would suggest to all of you, our fitness awareness has grown tremendously in this country. It's grown particularly with young people. And we have today, even if you take a sport, we said, okay, take cricket. But we'd say, whatever you might say, this is the fittest Indian cricket team. And you can see it in other ways. You look at our sports performance. It was boxing last week.
4 goals that we won,
or badminton, or even the women's cricket. I don't know if you followed it. And it's a kind of a mindset which comes along with that fitness. So I feel people are more assured, they are more confident. So to me, we in politics we use this phrase of a new India. To me, a new India is a more fit India, but a more competitive India. So it could be sports, it could be the way you rise to a crisis like we did to COVID. It could be the confidence with which you would say, do something on the tech side, do a 5G stack or a coaxium. So it's a package out there. And I need that package for my, for my sharpness.
Because of the demands of the job, sure. Since you mentioned sport, I know you're also a big cricket fanatic. Do you have a favorite cricketer, and who?
Favorite, it's hard to give you a single name. So if you'll permit me multiple choice answers, I would say yes. If I were to pick 3 people really top of my head, definitely Virender Sehwag.
Okay.
He's attacking, he takes the game to the opposition.
It's a bit like what you do in diplomacy.
I would say Dhoni, no question. But for this reason, he's always strategizing. I mean, even to the last ball, you can see, and that's like how to be cool under pressure. And maybe here, another degree of some self-identification, maybe Jimmy Anderson.
Jimmy Anderson.
For the reason,
Wow.
So I would say attacking, calm, endurance. That would be my slightly longish
Nice,
answer.
interesting. Ace, attacking, calm, and endurance. I also know that you're a voracious reader. Any book that's had a profound impact on you, either career-wise, diplomacy-wise, or even otherwise, personally?
Well, lot of books, because I do read a lot, but if I were to say, reinterpret your question to say a book which I would have repeatedly read, 25 times, 50 times kind of thing. Probably two. One is Mahabharat. I carry a copy on my travels. I read it often. I have multiple versions. I have a whole bookshelf of variations of it, including some of the multiple volume editions. Maybe Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings.
Those would be the two which I've read most often.
You're a Tolkien fan?
Very much.
Oh, interesting. So what's your favorite character from LOTR?
In Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, in Lord of the Rings.
I would say really probably on balance, and this comes down a bit to the cricket-like thing, probably Legolas.
Oh, nice.
Because he's the calm guy.
Yeah.
He's the guy who keeps, things are falling apart. Somebody has to hold
it together.
Hold it to
Gave him a bit of a poke. Is there any favorite album, favorite artist?
No, look, we were a household. My interest in international relations actually came out of music.
Came through music?
Yeah.
How
because
so?
When I was very young, first my grandparents and then my parents brought international music home. Through records,
nice.
and then encouraged, we used to listen to radio and all that. So for me, when I first thought about the world, I first thought about the world in terms of the music that I heard from the world, to some extent the books that you got. So it was, this was a time when there was no TV, remember?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So there was no TV, there was nothing which anybody modern would, anybody today, contemporary, young would identify as a connect with the world.
Yeah.
So it was largely radio, it was books. So for me, my international sense was also music, and even within India. And my parents were deeply interested in music. My mother actually had a degree in music.
Oh, wow.
So we would have somebody playing MS in one room and Lata Mangeshkar in another, and somebody would be trying to, put a Beethoven on the gramophone on the other side. So that was the house.
Nice. So finally, as we round up, you've been a diplomat since 1977-78 for the last 40, 45 years now. Surely there must have been a diplomat or multiple diplomats who have impacted you profoundly. Your most favorite diplomat, as it were.
I actually dedicated my book, who really, you kind of are an understudy to somebody when you join.
Yeah.
And he was, I think, enormously helpful in shaping my early years. And this was a person called Arvind Dev. So in personal terms, I would say he is someone, a lot of my thinking, my sense of tutelage goes back to him. I had some very, very good bosses, who are the kind of legends of the Indian Foreign Service. There was a gentleman called Shankar Bajpai, who was our ambassador in Washington, Rasgotra, who was a foreign secretary. So I was Dikshit, who was my boss in Colombo. So I had the good fortune to work under some very really good people who took care to teach you something consciously, So I would say they would have impacted me, but there were a lot of people I would meet, of other ministers or other countries.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to have actually sat in a meeting with Andrei Gromyko and and separately with George Shultz.
Oh.
So when you actually see somebody like a Gromyko or a Schultz of that era operate, it's
All right. Now, this is my last question. Since you brought up that's not part of the options, by the way.
It doesn't follow any of your, but my Rajya Sabha is due this year.
Oh, nice.
So I would suggest watch my Rajya Sabha.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, the External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar.
Well, that was a fantastic session. I think Dr. Jaishankar deserves a much rounder applause. And please, can we bring down the house? Wonderful to see so many people at the News 18 Rising India. Thank you so much.